After I retired, I bought a small cottage deep in the North Carolina mountains, the quiet life my late husband and I had dreamed about for decades. I thought the hardest days of my life were already behind me. Then one morning, the sound of tires grinding over gravel shattered that peace. My daughter didn't arrive alone. Her husband stepped out, and his parents followed behind him. The trunk popped open, packed with suitcases. She delivered a sentence for my freedom. My husband's parents have nowhere else to go. I've already decided starting today they'll be living here with you. I didn't argue, because I knew this was only the beginning of a plan. I'm so grateful you're here listening to my story. Before we begin, I'd love to know, where are you tuning in from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. It helps me understand who's in this community with us. Also, a quick note. This story contains fictionalized elements added for educational and entertainment purposes. Any resemblance to people or places is purely coincidental, but the lessons I'm sharing, those matter deeply and can help you protect yourself. The first time I stood on the front porch of my new cottage, I could barely breathe. It wasn't fear. It wasn't exhaustion from the 5-hour drive from Atlanta or the weeks of packing up a life I'd lived for 37 years. It was something deeper, something I hadn't felt in a long time. Hope. The cottage sat tucked into the side of a hill in Brevard, North Carolina, about 20 minutes outside Asheville. 1,200 square feet of fieldstone and cedar with a tin roof that looked like it had been there forever, but had actually been replaced just 2 years ago. The real estate agent Denise Kimball, a cheerful woman in her 50s who'd shown me 6 other properties before this one, had called it a mountain gem. I'd called it exactly what Graham and I had been dreaming about for 40 years. The porch wrapped around the front and east side of the house, wide enough for 2 rocking chairs and a small table. Beyond the railing, the land sloped down through a stand of white oaks and hemlocks, opening onto 2.5 acres that backed up to a creek. I could hear the water from where I stood, a soft, constant murmur that seemed to say, "You're home now." I stepped inside and set my purse on the kitchen counter. The afternoon light poured through the windows, turning everything golden. The floors were wide plank oak, worn smooth in places but solid. The kitchen was small but functional white cabinets, butcher block counters, a farmhouse sink that looked out onto the side yard. To the right was the living room with a stone fireplace that rose all the way to the vaulted ceiling. There were 2 bedrooms down a short hallway, one I'd use as mine, the other I'd already started thinking of as a guest room in case Claire ever wanted to visit with her husband Trevor. I walked to the back door and opened it. The creek ran about 30 yards from the house, clear and fast over smooth river stones. And just upstream, where the land rose into a rocky shelf, there was a waterfall 15 feet of white water tumbling into a pool so blue it didn't look real. Graham I whispered. We made it. Except we hadn't. Not really. Graham Hartwell died 3 years ago, 2 months before his 65th birthday. We'd been married for 42 years. We'd raised Claire together, worked side by side, me as a paralegal at a small firm in Marietta, Georgia, him as a regional manager for a hardware distribution company. We'd saved every extra dollar we could, talked every Sunday morning over coffee about the day we'd retire to the mountains. We'd even picked out the town Brevard. Graham had driven us up there one weekend in 2005, and we'd fallen in love with the waterfalls, the quiet, the way the whole place seemed to breathe at a slower pace. We'll get a little place with some land, he'd said. Sit on the porch in the mornings. Maybe I'll finally learn to fish. I'd laughed. You've been saying that for 20 years. Well, when we retire, I'll have time. But he never got the chance. It was a Tuesday morning. Graham had just left for work. I was pouring my second cup of coffee when my phone rang, his assistant voice shaking, telling me he'd collapsed in the parking lot. Massive heart attack. He was gone before the ambulance arrived. I didn't cry at the funeral. I didn't cry for weeks. I just felt empty. Like someone had reached inside me and scooped out everything that mattered. For the first year, I couldn't even think about the mountains. The idea of going there without him felt like a betrayal. But slowly, so slowly, I didn't even notice. At first, the dream came back. Not as our dream anymore, as his dream, the one he didn't get to live. I decided I'd live it for both of us. It took me 2 years to find the right place. I looked at dozens of properties, some too big, some too remote, some that just didn't feel right. But the moment Denise pulled into the gravel driveway of this cottage on a rainy morning in March, I knew how much I'd asked. $240,000. I'd done the math in my head. Graham's life insurance, a term policy through his company, had paid out $150,000. I had $90,000 in savings built up over 3 decades of living carefully, never spending more than we needed. It was exactly enough. I made an offer that afternoon. The sellers accepted 2 days later. Now, standing in the kitchen on my first night in the house, I felt something I hadn't felt since Graham died peace. I made myself a cup of tea and carried it into the living room. I'd had the gas fireplace serviced before closing, and it lit with a soft whoosh when I pressed the switch. I sat in the armchair I'd brought from the old house, the one Graham used to fall asleep in on Sunday afternoons, and watched the flames. Outside, the sky was turning deep purple. The trees were black silhouettes against the last light. The creek kept murmuring. "You would have loved this," I said out loud. And for the first time in 3 years, I let myself believe that maybe, just maybe, I was going to be okay. Before I'd even moved in, I'd made one more decision. During the closing on this cottage, I'd stumbled across another property, a run-down barn an hour east, near where Claire lived. The realtor mentioned it was a foreclosure going for almost nothing. I'd bought it on impulse, thinking maybe someday Claire might need her own place, somewhere away from Trevor if things ever got worse. I hadn't told her yet. I wasn't even sure why I'd done it. Just a mother's instinct, I suppose. The phone rang at 11. I'd been half asleep in the chair, the fire still going, my empty teacup balanced on the armrest. The sound startled me so badly, I nearly dropped it. I grabbed my cell off the side table. The screen said Claire. "Hey, honey," I said, trying to sound more awake than I felt. "Everything okay?" There was a pause. Too long. "Mom!" Her voice was tight, strained. "I need to ask you something." I sat up straighter. "What's wrong?" "Nothing's wrong. I just..." Another pause. I could hear her breathing fast and shallow. "Can I come see you tomorrow? I need to talk to you about something." "Of course, but Claire, you're scaring me. What's going on?" It's complicated. I'll explain when I see you. Is 10 o'clock okay?" 10 is fine, but I have to go. I'll see you tomorrow. I love you." She hung up before I could say anything else. I sat there in the dim light of the fire, staring at my phone. Claire had sounded scared, or maybe not scared, trapped, like someone standing at the edge of something she couldn't see the bottom of. I told myself I was overreacting. She was 33 years old, married, working as a teacher at a good school in Atlanta. She was fine. She had to be fine. But as I turned off the fire and walked down the hallway to my new bedroom, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was very, very wrong. And somewhere deep in my gut, I knew the peace I'd felt an hour ago was about to be tested. I woke Thursday morning to birdsong and the soft murmur of the creek. For a moment, I forgot about the phone call. Then I remembered Claire's voice. "Can I come see you tomorrow? It's urgent," and the peace drained out of me. I got up, made coffee, and stood at the kitchen window, watching the trees catch the early light. At 7 o'clock, I heard the car. It wasn't the careful sound of a guest arriving. It was fast tires on gravel engine cutting off sharp. I set down my mug and walked to the front window. A silver SUV sat in my driveway. Georgia plates. The back was packed with suitcases. My stomach dropped. Trevor stepped out of the driver's seat. I hadn't seen my son-in-law in 6 months. He looked the same, mid-30s, dark hair, button-down shirt, moving with the kind of confidence that always made me uneasy. The back doors opened. An older man climbed out, late 60s, silver hair, sharp jaw, and surveyed the property like he was inspecting it. Behind him came a woman about the same age, blonde hair, pulled tight, wearing a cardigan. She glanced at the house and wrinkled her nose. Then Claire got out. I was already moving toward the door. "Mom!" Claire's voice was stretched thin. She came up the porch steps, and I caught her by the shoulders. "What's going on?" Before she could answer, Trevor was beside her. "Morning, Vivian. Sorry we're early. These are my parents, Eugene and Lorraine Caldwell." Eugene gave me a curt nod. Lorraine didn't look at me. I turned back to Claire. "Honey, what is this?" Her hands were shaking. "Mom, I'm so sorry. Trevor's parents lost their house. The bank foreclosed. They didn't have anywhere to go, and Trevor thought..." Her voice cracked. "He thought maybe they could stay here, just for a little while." The words landed like cold water. "Stay here." Just temporarily, Trevor said. I know it's a lot to ask, but you've got plenty of space. 2 bedrooms, right? They could take the guest room. It won't be for long. I stared at him, then at Claire. Her eyes were red. Did you know about this? She shook her head. Not until yesterday. They were already on the road. Already on the road. I looked at the SUV, at the suitcases, at Eugene walking toward the porch like he'd already made himself at home. Ms. Hartwell. Eugene said, his voice flat. We appreciate you opening your door. This has been difficult for our family. I didn't answer. Because the truth was settling in, this wasn't a request. They were already here. And Claire, standing between us, looking like she might break, was caught in the middle. I took a breath. Claire, can we talk just us? Trevor put his hand on her shoulder. Actually, I need to get back to Atlanta. How about we get them settled first? Lorraine spoke. Is there a bathroom? I blinked. What? A bathroom. I've been in that car for 5 hours. I pointed toward the door. Inside, down the hall, first door on the left. She walked past me without a word. 20 minutes later, their suitcases were stacked in my living room. Trevor had carried them in, talking about how grateful they were, how temporary this was, how he knew I'd understand. Claire stood by the door, arms wrapped around herself. I pulled her aside while Trevor was at the car. Claire, what is this really about? She looked at me, and I saw something in her face, fear, exhaustion, but she shook her head. I'm sorry, Mom. I didn't know what else to do. But why here? Don't they have other family? Trevor said this was the only option. He said if we didn't help, they'd be on the street. I wanted to say, that's not your responsibility. But Trevor was coming back, and Claire was pulling away her hand, brushing her stomach in a quick, unconscious gesture. Thanks again, Vivian, Trevor said, shaking my hand. We'll check in soon. Come on, Claire. She squeezed my hand one more time. It was still trembling. Then they were gone. That evening, Lorraine complained about the couch. Too firm, she said. Eugene asked if I had bourbon. I told him I didn't drink. He looked at me like I'd said something absurd. At 10:30, I heard footsteps. The back door creaked. I moved to the window. Eugene stood on the porch phone to his ear. Don't worry, he said. She won't say no. She already let us in. A pause. And if she does, we have other plans. I stepped back, heart pounding. Other plans. I thought about Trevor's easy smile, Claire's shaking hands, the way Lorraine had looked at my house like it was beneath her even as she moved into it. This wasn't temporary. This was something else. I didn't sleep that night. Eugene's voice kept playing in my head. We have other plans, and by the time the sky started lightening outside my window, I'd made a decision. If they had plans, I needed to be ready. At 7:30 Friday morning, I got dressed, grabbed my purse, and walked into the living room. Eugene was asleep on the couch, one arm flung over his face. Lorraine was in the guest room, my guest room with the door shut. I could hear her snoring. I slipped out the front door and got into my car. Brevard was 20 minutes down the mountain, a small town that still had a main street with locally owned shops and a diner that served breakfast all day. I'd been there twice since buying the house, once with the real estate agent, once to open a bank account, but I didn't know it well yet. This morning I had a list. First stop, the Pisgah National Forest Ranger Station, a low brick building just off the highway. I parked and went inside. A young man in a green uniform looked up from behind the counter. Morning, he said. How can I help you? I just moved into a place up near Davidson River, I said. I wanted to ask about black bears. Are they common around here? He nodded. Pretty common, especially this time of year. They're coming out of hibernation looking for food. You keeping your trash secured? I am. But I heard there was a big one spotted nearby. Is that true? Could be. We've had reports of a male maybe 350 pounds in that area. He's not aggressive, but he's bold, comes right up to houses if he smells something interesting. I made a mental note. 350 pounds. Bold. What attracts them? I asked. Food, mostly. Garbage, birdseed, pet food. Anything with a strong smell. He paused. You worried about safety. Just want to be prepared, I said. He handed me a pamphlet. Keep your distance, make noise if you see one, and don't leave food out. You'll be fine. I thanked him and left. Next stop, the hardware store on Main Street. The aisles smelled like sawdust and motor oil. I found what I needed in the back, 2 wireless security cameras, motion-activated weatherproof. They weren't cheap, $170 each, but I paid in cash and carried them to the car. Then I drove to the grocery store. The butcher at the meat counter looked up when I approached. "Help you with something." "I need fish scraps," I said. "As much as you've got, maybe 18 pounds. He blinked. 18 pounds of scraps. "For fertilizer," I said quickly. "I'm composting." He didn't look convinced, but he shrugged and disappeared into the back. 5 minutes later, he came out with 2 plastic bags, heavy and dripping. $15, he said. I also bought 3 jars of honey. By the time I loaded everything into the trunk, it was almost 10 o'clock. On the way out of town, I passed a small house with a white picket fence and a truck parked in the driveway. An older man was standing in the yard pruning a rose bush. He looked up as I drove by and I recognized him. I'd seen him the day I moved in, waving from his porch. On impulse, I pulled over. He set down his pruning shears and walked to the fence. He was in his 70s, I guessed, with a weathered face and close-cropped white hair. He wore a flannel shirt and jeans, and he had the kind of steady assessing gaze that made me think he'd spent a lot of time watching people. "Morning," he said. "You're the one who bought the old Pritchard place up on Davidson River, aren't you?" "I am," I said, "Vivian Hartwell." He wiped his hand on his jeans and reached over the fence to shake mine. His grip was firm. "Frank Whitmore. I live here year-round, saw you move in last week. Nice to meet you." "You settling in all right?" he asked. His tone was casual, but there was something in his eyes like he was reading between the lines. I hesitated. Then I said, "Mostly, I've had some unexpected guests." Frank nodded slowly. "Family, something like that." He studied me for a moment, then pulled a business card out of his shirt pocket. It was old, the edges worn, and it read, "Franklin Whitmore, Sheriff, Transylvania County, retired." Retired 10 years ago, he said. "But I still know most folks around here, and I keep an eye on things." He handed me the card. "If you ever need anything, Vivian, day or night, you call me. Understand?" I looked at the card, then at him. There was no pity in his face, no judgment, just an offer. "Thank you," I said quietly. He tapped the fence post. "You take care now." I drove away feeling something I hadn't felt since Eugene and Lorraine arrived not alone. When I got back to the house, Eugene's car was still in the driveway. I parked, popped the trunk, and carried the camera boxes inside. Lorraine was in the kitchen making herself tea. She looked up when I walked in. "Where have you been?" she asked. "Town," I said. I didn't stop moving. I went straight to my bedroom, set the boxes on the bed, and opened one. The instructions were clear: mount the bracket, connect to Wi-Fi, download the app. I could do this. I waited until early afternoon when Eugene had gone out for a walk and Lorraine was napping. Then I grabbed a stepladder and went outside. The first camera went on the front porch, angled toward the driveway. The second went near the creek, mounted on a tree aimed back at the house. Both had a clear view. I was tightening the last screw when I heard footsteps behind me. "What are those?" I turned. Lorraine stood at the edge of the yard, arms crossed, squinting at the camera. "Security cameras," I said. "For what?" "Wildlife," I said. "I want to document the deer. Maybe get some footage of the creek." She looked skeptical. "You need 2 cameras for that." "I like options," I said. I climbed down the ladder and folded it. "Is there a problem?" She stared at me for a long moment. Then she shook her head. "No, I just think it's a little paranoid." "Maybe," I said, "but it's my house." She went back inside. That evening I made dinner spaghetti, simple, nothing they could complain about, and we ate in silence. Eugene asked if I had any beer. I said no. Lorraine said the sauce was too salty. I cleared the plates, washed them, and went to my room. At 11 o'clock, I heard them go to bed. At 11:30, I slipped out the back door. The bags of fish scraps were hidden in the shed. I carried them into the woods about 50 yards from the house and dumped them in a pile. Then I took the jars of honey and drizzled a trail from the pile back to the house, across the yard, up the steps, right to the back porch. The smell was strong, sharp, exactly what the ranger had said would attract a bear. I went back inside, washed my hands, and sat down in the armchair by the window. I didn't turn on any lights. I just sat there watching the woods, watching the porch. I didn't sleep. I waited. 2 nights passed and the bear never came. I'd check the cameras every morning, watch the footage of the empty porch, the untouched trail of fish and honey slowly drying in the sun. By Saturday afternoon, I'd cleaned it all up. Whatever I'd hoped to accomplish, it hadn't worked. But on Sunday evening, Lorraine made her move. I was in the kitchen washing dinner dishes when she appeared in the doorway. She was wearing a cardigan buttoned all the way up, even though it was warm inside, and she had one hand pressed to her lower back. "Vivian," she said. Her voice was tight, pained. "I need to talk to you." I dried my hands on a dish towel. "What is it? I can't sleep on that couch anymore." She winced like even standing hurt. "My back is killing me, and my knees." She touched her right knee, grimacing. "I have arthritis. It's gotten so much worse since we got here." I looked at her. She was breathing shallow like she was trying not to cry. "I'm sorry to hear that," I said carefully. "I brought my medication." She pulled a small pill bottle from her pocket and held it up. The label was faded, hard to read from where I stood. "But it's not enough. I need a real bed. Just for a few nights until we figure something else out." I felt my jaw tighten. "Lorraine, the guest room, has a bed. It's too firm. I tried it the first night I couldn't sleep at all." She looked at me, and there were actual tears in her eyes now. "Vivian, I know this is asking a lot, but I'm in so much pain. If I could just use your room for a little while." Before I could answer, my phone rang. I glanced at the screen. Trevor. Lorraine's eyes flicked to the phone, then back to me. I answered. "Hello." "Mom." Trevor's voice was smooth, concerned. "I just got off the phone with my mother. She told me about her back." "She's standing right here," I said. "Good. Listen, I know this is uncomfortable, but she's really struggling. You understand, don't you? She's in pain. And you've got that nice big room with the good mattress." "Trevor, it's just temporary. A week, maybe 2, just until we can get her to a doctor and sort out her medication." I looked at Lorraine. She was still holding the pill bottle, still wincing. I thought about arguing. I thought about saying, "This is my house. That's my room. You can't just take it." But I also thought about the way Eugene had smiled at me through the window 3 nights ago, about the phone call I'd overheard. We have other plans. If I said no, what would they do? "Fine," I said quietly. "She can use the room." Trevor's relief was audible. "Thank you, Mom. I knew you'd understand. I'll check in with you tomorrow." He hung up. Lorraine smiled at me. It didn't reach her eyes. It took me an hour to move my things. I carried my clothes to the small bedroom at the end of the hall, the one I'd thought of as a guest room, the one that barely fit a double bed and a dresser. I stripped the sheets from the master bed and remade it with fresh ones. Lorraine watched from the doorway, not offering to help. When I was done, she walked in, looked around, and nodded. "This will do." She didn't say thank you. That night, I lay in the narrow bed in the small room and stared at the ceiling. I could hear her moving around in my room, opening drawers, running water in my bathroom. I didn't sleep. At 11 o'clock, I heard footsteps in the hallway. I got up, cracked my door open, and looked out. Lorraine was standing at the top of the stairs. She wasn't limping. She wasn't wincing. She was just standing there, looking down at the living room where Eugene was watching TV. Then she walked down the stairs. Not slowly, not carefully. 2 steps at a time. I watched her disappear into the living room. A moment later, I heard her laugh, light easy, like someone who'd just heard a good joke. I closed the door and sat on the edge of the bed, my heart pounding. The next morning, I waited until Lorraine was in the bathroom. Then I slipped into the master bedroom. The pill bottle was on the nightstand. I picked it up and turned it over. There was no pharmacy label, no prescription information, no patient name, no dosage instructions, no warnings. Just a plain white sticker on the side that said, in small print, multivitamin, joint support. Not arthritis medication, a supplement, the kind you could buy at any grocery store. I pulled out my phone and took a picture. Then I put the bottle back exactly where I'd found it and left the room. At 9 o'clock, I called Diane. Diane Fletcher had been a pharmacist at the same Walgreens in Marietta for 30 years. We'd worked together on a case once, a malpractice suit where I'd needed someone to explain prescription errors in terms a jury could understand. She'd been brilliant. We'd stayed in touch. She answered on the second ring. "Vivian, it's been ages. How are you?" "I'm good. Listen, I have a quick question. If someone has arthritis, real arthritis, what kind of medication would they be on?" Depends on the severity. Mild cases, you'd see NSAIDs, ibuprofen, naproxen. Moderate to severe, you'd see prescription anti-inflammatories, maybe corticosteroids. Why? And those would all have prescription labels right from a pharmacy. Of course, dosage, patient name, refill information warnings. It's required by law. I looked at the photo on my phone, the plain bottle, the generic sticker. What if someone was taking a multivitamin and calling it arthritis medication? I asked. There was a pause. Vivian, is someone lying to you? I think so. Then they're not in pain, Diane said flatly, or at least not the kind of pain that needs real medication. I thanked her and hung up. I sat in the small bedroom, my bedroom now apparently, and looked around. At my clothes crammed into a dresser half the size of the one I'd had before, at the window that looked out onto the side yard instead of the creek, at the bed that was too narrow and too firm. And I thought about Lorraine walking down the stairs like an athlete, laughing in the living room, sleeping in my bed. I thought about Eugene's phone call. We have other plans. I thought about Trevor's easy manipulation. You understand, don't you? And I realized something. This wasn't about shelter. This wasn't even about taking advantage of my hospitality. This was about ownership. They were pushing me out of my own space piece by piece, testing how much I'd give up, how much I'd tolerate, and I was standing in their way. For 3 days, the house was quiet, too quiet. Eugene and Lorraine moved through my space like they owned it. Lorraine had taken over the master bedroom completely, her clothes in my closet, her toiletries on my bathroom counter. Eugene spent his mornings on the porch drinking coffee I'd made, staring out at the creek like he was planning something. I stayed in the small bedroom and waited for the next move. It came on Thursday afternoon. I was folding laundry when my phone rang. Claire. I answered immediately. Hey, honey. Her voice was thick-choked. She'd been crying. Mom. She could barely get the word out. I have bad news. My stomach dropped. What happened? Trevor's father passed away. I froze the towel in my hands, going still. What? Last night. It was sudden, a heart attack. Trevor just found out this morning. She was sobbing now, struggling to breathe. Mom, I'm so sorry. I know you just met them, but... Claire, wait. I set the towel down, my mind racing. Are you sure? Yes, Trevor told me. He's devastated. I walked to the doorway of the small bedroom and looked down the hall toward the living room. Eugene was sitting on the couch, remote in hand, flipping through channels, very much alive. Honey, I said slowly, your father-in-law is here, right now, in my living room. Silence. What? Eugene, he's sitting on my couch. He's not dead. That's, her voice cracked. That's impossible. Trevor said... She stopped. I could hear her breathing, fast and shallow. Wait, Trevor didn't say Eugene. He said Eugene's brother, his uncle. He passed away and there was a life insurance policy. How much? I asked. $750,000. Her voice was barely a whisper now. Trevor said half of it was supposed to help you. Since you took his parents in and everything's been so hard for them, I closed my eyes. $750,000. Claire, I said carefully, did Trevor actually show you this policy? Any paperwork? No. He just told me about it this morning. He said the lawyer was handling everything, but he wanted me to call you and let you know. He thought it might make things easier. I looked down the hall again. Eugene was still on the couch, completely unbothered. Honey, I need to call you back. Mom, I'll call you back in 10 minutes, I promise. I hung up before she could say anything else. I stood there for a moment, staring at Eugene. Then I walked into the living room. He looked up. Need something? Just checking, I said. You're feeling all right. No chest pain. Trouble breathing. He frowned. I'm fine. Why, no reason, I said and walked back to my room. I sat on the edge of the narrow bed and pulled up the contact I hadn't called in 3 years, Prudential. Graham's life insurance policy had been through them, a term life policy his company had offered as part of his benefits package. When he died, they'd paid out $150,000. It had taken 6 weeks and a mountain of paperwork, but they'd been professional, efficient. I dialed the customer service number. A woman answered on the 3rd ring. Prudential Life Insurance, this is Angela. How can I help you today? Hi, Angela. My name is Vivian Hartwell. I'm calling about a policy that was paid out to me in 2021. Policyholder was Graham Hartwell. "One moment, please." I heard typing. Then, "Yes, Mrs. Hartwell, I have that policy pulled up. $150,000 term life benefit paid out in full in August 2021. Is there an issue?" "No issue. I just need to confirm something. Were there any other policies under my husband's name? Anything that might have been connected to that payout?" More typing. "Let me check." "No, ma'am. Just the one policy. Term life through his employer. That's all we have on file." And there wouldn't be any way for someone else, another family member maybe, to have a separate policy that was somehow connected to ours. "No, ma'am. Each policy is independent. If there were other policies, they wouldn't be linked to yours in any way." I exhaled. "Okay, thank you. Is there anything else I can help you with today?" "No, that's all I needed." I hung up and stared at the phone. $750,000. A lie, all of it. I called Claire back. "Mom," she answered on the first ring, her voice raw. "What's going on?" "Honey, there's no life insurance policy." "What?" I just called Prudential. Graham's policy was the only one on file. $150,000 paid out in 2021. There's no $750,000. There's no uncle who died. There's nothing. Silence. Then quietly, "Why would Trevor lie about that?" "I don't know," I said, "but I'm going to find out." I hung up and dialed Trevor's number. He answered on the second ring. "Vivian, hi. Listen, I know Claire probably told you about my uncle." "There's no uncle," I said flatly. Pause. "I'm sorry. There's no dead uncle. There's no $750,000 life insurance policy. I just verified it with Prudential. So I'll ask you again, why did you lie?" His tone shifted. Cooler. "I think there's been a misunderstanding." "No, there hasn't. You told Claire your uncle died and left insurance money. That's not true. So why did you say it?" "Vivian, I don't know what you think. You answer the question." Another pause. Then in a voice that was almost amused, "I think we're done here." The line went dead. I tried calling Claire back. It rang once, then went to voicemail. I tried again. Same thing. He'd blocked me or told her not to answer. I sat on the bed gripping the phone so hard my knuckles went white. Why? Why invent a dead uncle? Why invent an inheritance? And then it hit me. He wanted Claire to think I owed them, that I should be grateful, that taking them in wasn't charity, it was repayment. He was building a narrative, a justification, and Claire, desperate to keep the peace, had believed him. That night, I couldn't sleep again. At 10:30, I heard voices in the living room, low, deliberate. I got up and crept to my door, cracking it open just enough to hear Eugene's voice, the daughter's starting to crack. "Lorraine, are you sure?" "I can tell." She called Vivian today asking questions. Trevor tried to smooth it over, but she's not buying it anymore. "What do we do? We move faster." Eugene's voice was cold matter of fact. "We can't afford for her to start talking to Vivian too much. If they compare notes—" "They already are," Lorraine said. "Then we escalate, make Vivian look unstable, make people question her judgment. If we do this right, Claire won't trust her anymore." Silence. Then Lorraine, "What about Vivian herself?" Eugene laughed. It was a low, ugly sound. "She's tougher than I thought. But everyone breaks eventually." I stepped back from the door, my heart pounding. Make Vivian look unstable. They weren't just trying to take my house. They were trying to take my credibility, my relationships, my daughter, and they were just getting started. For over a week, I watched them move through my house like they owned it. Eugene on the porch every morning, Lorraine redecorating the master bedroom, both of them acting like I was the guest. I'd tried reason. I'd tried boundaries. Neither had worked. On Saturday morning at 4 a.m., I decided to try something else. I slipped out of bed in the small room and dressed in the dark. The house was silent, Eugene snoring on the couch, Lorraine behind the closed door of my bedroom. I grabbed the last 2 bags of fish scraps from the shed and carried them to the edge of the woods. This time I didn't just leave a trail. I dumped both bags in a pile 20 feet from the back porch, then drizzled honey over the top. The smell was overwhelming, sharp, rotten sweet. If the bear hadn't come before, it would come now. I went back inside, washed my hands, and sat in the kitchen, with a cup of coffee watching the gray light creep over the mountains. At 5:30, my phone buzzed, the camera app. Motion detected back porch. I opened the feed. The bear was bigger than I'd expected, easily 350 pounds, maybe more. It moved slowly, methodically, sniffing the air as it approached the pile of fish. It stopped, lifted its head, and looked straight at the house. Then it walked up onto the back porch. I stood and moved to the window. The bear pressed its nose against the glass of the living room slider, fogging it with its breath. Then it lifted one massive paw and scraped at the frame. From the couch, Eugene shot upright. "What the—" The bear hit the glass again, harder. Lorraine screamed from the bedroom. "Eugene, what is that?" "There's a bear." Eugene scrambled off the couch, stumbling backward. "Vivian, there's a goddamn bear on your porch." I grabbed my phone and dialed the ranger station, keeping my voice high and shaky. "Hello, yes, this is Vivian Hartwell on Davidson River Road. There's a black bear outside my house. It was pawing at the window." The ranger's voice was calm. "Is it still there, ma'am?" I glanced out the window. The bear had dropped back to all fours and was ambling toward the woods, already losing interest. "No," I said. "It just left, but I wanted to report it." "Good. Keep your trash secured and don't leave food outside. It'll move on." "Thank you." I hung up. Eugene stared at me. "That's it. That's all they're going to do." "It's gone," I said. "There's nothing to do. Nothing to—" His face was red, his voice rising. "Vivian, that thing could have broken through the glass. It could have gotten inside." Lorraine appeared in the hallway, clutching her robe. "This place isn't safe. We could have been killed." I set my phone on the counter. "You weren't. The bear was curious, that's all. It didn't try to break in. It just smelled something and came to investigate." Eugene jabbed a finger toward the porch. "You need to do something. Put up an electric fence. Call animal control. Something." "I'm not putting up a fence," I said. "And animal control doesn't come out for bears unless they're a persistent problem. This is a problem." "No," I said evenly. "This is the mountains, Eugene. Wildlife is part of life here. If you can't handle that, maybe this isn't the right place for you." Lorraine's eyes narrowed. "Are you saying we should leave?" I looked at her. "I'm saying you knew what you were getting into when you came here." Eugene took a step closer. "We didn't know we'd be living in a place where bears can just walk up to the door. Now you do." For a long moment, no one spoke. Then Lorraine said quietly, "If you won't protect us, we'll have to take matters into our own hands." "What does that mean?" I asked. She didn't answer. She just turned and walked back to the bedroom, slamming the door behind her. Eugene stood there a moment longer, breathing hard. Then he grabbed his phone off the coffee table and walked outside. I spent the rest of the morning cleaning up the fish scraps. The bear had dragged most of the pile into the woods, but there was still enough left to attract flies. I worked quickly double-bagging everything and hauling it to the trash can by the road. When I came back, Eugene was still outside, pacing near the driveway with his phone pressed to his ear. He looked up as I walked past. I didn't stop. But as I reached the front door, he called out, "Vivian." I turned. He lowered the phone and smiled. It wasn't a friendly smile. "This isn't over," he said. I held his gaze. "I didn't think it was." He laughed low, cold, and went back to his call. I went inside and locked the door behind me. That night, I pulled up the camera footage on my phone and watched the bear approach the porch again. Watched it paw at the glass. Watched Eugene and Lorraine panic. I should have felt satisfied. I should have felt like I'd won something. But all I felt was tired, because Eugene was right. This wasn't over, and I was starting to realize that scaring them wasn't going to work. They weren't going to leave on their own, which meant I needed a different plan. By the third weekend, the calls started coming. The first one was from Denise Kimball, the real estate agent who'd sold me the house. I was making breakfast when my phone rang, and her voice was tight, uncomfortable. "Vivian, hi. I'm sorry to bother you, but I need to ask you something." "Sure. What's going on?" "I got a call yesterday. A man he didn't give his name asking questions about you, about whether you seemed mentally competent when you bought the house." I set down the spatula. "What?" "He wanted to know if you'd been confused during the closing, if you'd needed help understanding the paperwork, if I'd had any concerns about your memory." "Denise, I've been a paralegal for 35 years. I know how to read a contract." "I know." I told him that. "But Vivian, why would someone be asking those questions?" I didn't answer right away, because I already knew. "Thank you for telling me," I said finally. "I appreciate it." She hesitated. "Are you okay?" "I'm fine." I hung up and stared at the stove. The eggs were burning. The second call came 2 hours later. Linda Marshall, a woman I'd met at the Methodist church in town when I'd visited a few weeks ago. We'd sat together during the service, exchanged numbers, talked about getting coffee sometime. "Vivian, I hope I'm not overstepping," she said, "but I heard something today and I wanted to check in with you." "What did you hear?" "That you've been having memory problems. That you've been forgetting things, getting confused. Is that true?" I closed my eyes. "No, Linda, that's not true." "Oh, thank God, I didn't think it sounded right. But the person who told me seemed so concerned." "Who told you?" "I don't know. A friend of a friend, I think. She said someone had reached out to her asking if anyone in the church knew you and if they'd noticed anything off." I thanked her and hung up. By then, my hands were shaking. At 2 o'clock, Frank Whitmore knocked on my door. I opened it to find him standing on the porch, arms crossed, jaw tight. "We need to talk," he said. I stepped aside and let him in. Frank didn't sit. He stood in the middle of the living room, my living room, where Eugene and Lorraine had spread their belongings like they owned the place, and looked at me. "Eugene came by my house yesterday," he said. "What did he say?" "He told me you've been acting strange, confused, that you've been accusing Lorraine of faking an illness, making wild claims about life insurance policies that don't exist. He said he's worried about you." I felt my chest tighten. "And what did you say?" Frank's expression didn't change. "I told him I've known you for 3 weeks, and in that time, you've been sharper than most people half your age. Then I told him to get off my property. The relief was so sudden I almost sat down." "Frank, Vivian, I don't know what's going on here, but I know a smear campaign when I see one, and I know elder abuse when I see it." I looked at him. "You think that's what this is?" "I think you've got 2 people living in your house who don't belong here, and they're trying to make you look incompetent so no one will believe you when you fight back." He was right. I knew he was right. "What do I do?" I asked quietly. "You get a lawyer today." I tried calling Claire before I left. 3 times. The first 2 went straight to voicemail. The third rang once, then disconnected. I sat in my car in the driveway staring at my phone. Trevor had blocked me, or he'd told Claire not to answer. Either way, I couldn't reach my daughter. Harrison Stone's office was in Hendersonville, a 20-minute drive from Brevard. Frank had given me his number that morning, along with a firm instruction: "Don't wait. Call him now." The office was small wood paneling, framed diplomas on the wall, a desk piled with case files. Harrison himself was in his early 50s, salt and pepper hair, reading glasses perched on his nose. He stood when I walked in and shook my hand with a firm, steady grip. "Mrs. Hartwell, Frank spoke very highly of you. Thank you for seeing me on such short notice." Frank said it was urgent. He gestured to a chair across from his desk. "Tell me what's going on." I told him everything. Eugene and Lorraine arriving unannounced, the fake arthritis medication, the false life insurance story, the bear incident. And now the phone calls people all over town asking if I was losing my memory, if I was confused, if I was competent. Harrison listened without interrupting, taking notes on a yellow legal pad. When I finished, he set down his pen and looked at me. "Mrs. Hartwell, what you're describing is elder abuse. Financial exploitation, emotional manipulation, and now reputational harm. This is serious. What do I do?" "We build a legal fortress. First, we establish your competency beyond any doubt. I'll refer you to a psychiatrist for a cognitive evaluation. Second, we protect your assets. You'll need a revocable living trust. Third, we document everything, every phone call, every lie, every attempt to discredit you." "How long will that take?" "A week, maybe 2. But Vivian, I need you to understand something." He leaned forward. "If they're spreading rumors now, they're preparing for something bigger. An eviction attempt. A conservatorship petition. Maybe both. Can they do that? If they can convince a judge you're incompetent, yes." The word hit me like a stone. "Then we stop them," I said. Harrison nodded. "Yes, we do." I left his office an hour later with a list of next steps and a retainer agreement signed. The sun was setting as I drove back toward Brevard, the mountains dark against the orange sky. My phone rang as I turned onto Davidson River Road. Unknown number. I almost didn't answer, but something made me. "Hello." A woman's voice, professional and cool. "Mrs. Hartwell." "Yes. This is Paula Hendricks. I'm calling from Adult Protective Services. We've received a complaint regarding your welfare, and I need to schedule a home visit to conduct an investigation. The car swerved slightly. I steadied it, pulled over onto the shoulder. A complaint, I said. From who? The complaint was filed anonymously. But it alleges that you're living in unsafe conditions, that you may not be capable of managing your own affairs, and that there are concerns about your mental competency. I closed my eyes. Of course. When do you want to come? I asked. How does Monday at 2 o'clock sound? Fine. Thank you, Mrs. Hartwell. I'll see you then. She hung up. I sat on the side of the road, engine idling, and stared at the darkening trees. They'd moved faster than I thought, and I had 2 days to prepare. Monday morning, I was in Harrison Stone's office by 9. I'd barely slept. All night, I'd lain in the narrow bed in the small room, my room now, I supposed, and thought about Paula Hendricks' voice on the phone. Professional. Cool. We've received a complaint, but I wasn't going to let them take this from me. Harrison was waiting when I walked in, a stack of documents already spread across his desk. Good, he said. Let's get to work. We started with the trust. A revocable living trust. Harrison explained, sliding a thick packet of papers toward me. Puts your assets under legal protection. You'll be the grantor and the trustee, which means you still control everything. But if someone tries to claim you're incompetent, the trust makes it much harder for them to challenge your decisions. And Claire, she'll be named as your successor trustee if something happens to you, and only if she takes over. But until then, you're in full control. I read through the documents, the cottage, my savings, my car, everything listed protected. How much does this cost? $3,200 for the trust, including filing fees. I can have it ready to sign by this afternoon. I nodded. Do it. Step 2. Harrison said, is the medical evaluation. I've already called Dr. Audrey Klein. She's a psychiatrist who does competency assessments for legal cases. She can see you at 10 this morning. I looked at him. This morning? I told her it was urgent. She's doing me a favor. I exhaled. Okay. Dr. Audrey Klein's office was in the same building 2 floors up. She was in her late 50s, gray hair pulled into a neat bun, wire-rimmed glasses perched on her nose. Her office was quiet clinical diplomas on the wall, a desk with neatly organized test materials. Mrs. Hartwell, she said, shaking my hand. Harrison explained the situation. I'm going to administer a standard cognitive assessment. It's called the Mini Mental State Examination, or MMSE. It takes about 10 to 15 minutes. What does it test? Orientation memory, attention language, and visual spatial skills. The maximum score is 30 points. A score of 24 or above is considered normal cognitive function. I sat down. Let's do it. She started with orientation. What is today's date? Monday, May 20th, 2024. What is the current season? Spring. Where are we right now? What building? What city? What state? We're in a medical office building in Hendersonville, North Carolina. She made notes. Good. Next was memory. She gave me 3 words, apple, table, penny, and asked me to repeat them. Then she moved on to attention, having me spell world backward and subtract 7 from 100 repeatedly. By the time we reached the language section, I was starting to relax. I knew I wasn't confused. I knew I wasn't losing my memory. But having it confirmed point by point felt like armor clicking into place. At the end, she set down her pen and looked at me. 30 out of 30, Mrs. Hartwell, perfect score. Relief flooded through me. What does that mean? It means you demonstrate full cognitive capacity, no impairment whatsoever. She pulled out a sheet of letterhead and started typing on her laptop. I'll write a letter for Harrison to include in your file. If Adult Protective Services questions your competency, this will be part of your defense. Thank you, I said quietly. She looked at me over her glasses. Mrs. Hartwell, I've been doing this work for 20 years. I can tell when someone is being exploited. Whatever you're dealing with, don't let them make you doubt yourself. I nodded, not trusting myself to speak. By noon, I was back in Harrison's office. He'd printed the trust documents and had them ready for my signature. I signed each page, feeling the weight of each stroke of the pen. This was mine, my house, my life, and no one was going to take it. Harrison also had a folder ready, thick, organized, labeled Hartwell, APS response. What's in there? I asked. Everything Paula Hendricks needs to see. Dr. Klein's letter confirming your cognitive capacity, your bank statements showing you manage your finances independently, the camera footage from your property proving you're capable of maintaining your home and protecting yourself. I stared at the folder. You think it'll be enough? I think Paula's going to walk into your house expecting to find an elderly woman who's being taken advantage of. Instead, she's going to find someone who's organized, prepared, and legally protected. He leaned back in his chair. Vivian, you've done everything right. Now we wait and see what she finds. I picked up the folder and stood. Thank you, Harrison. Call me after the visit. Let me know how it goes. I drove home with the folder on the passenger seat, the signed trust documents in my bag, and a knot of anxiety tight in my chest. The house was quiet when I pulled into the driveway. Eugene's car was gone, probably out running errands. Lorraine was inside, I assumed still in the master bedroom. I carried the folder inside and set it on the kitchen counter. Then I sat down and waited. At exactly 2 o'clock, a white sedan pulled into the driveway. I stood and walked to the window. A woman stepped out, early 40s, short brown hair, wearing a blazer and slacks. She carried a clipboard and a badge clipped to her belt. She walked up to the front door and knocked. I opened it. Mrs. Hartwell. Yes. She held up the badge. I'm Paula Hendricks from Adult Protective Services. We spoke on the phone. May I come in? I stepped aside. Of course. Paula walked into the living room, her eyes moving over the space, taking in the couch, where Eugene slept, the suitcases still stacked in the corner, the clutter that had accumulated over the past 3 weeks. Then she looked at me. Mrs. Hartwell, she said, we need to talk. We sat down in the living room. Paula took the armchair across from me, setting her clipboard on her lap. Eugene and Lorraine were on the couch, Eugene with his arms crossed, Lorraine with her hands folded, both of them wearing expressions of quiet concern. Paula looked at me. Mrs. Hartwell, I'm here because we received a complaint regarding your welfare. It was filed anonymously, but it alleges concerns about financial exploitation, unsafe living conditions, and questions about your cognitive capacity. I kept my voice steady. I'm aware. She glanced at Eugene and Lorraine. The complaint suggests that you may be unable to manage your own affairs and that there are individuals in your home who may not have your best interests at heart. Eugene shifted forward. Ms. Hendricks, we're the ones who are concerned. My parents and I moved in here to help Vivian, but she's been erratic, accusing my mother of faking an illness, making wild claims about insurance policies. We're worried about her. Paula made a note. And you are Eugene Caldwell. This is my wife, Lorraine. We've been staying here for the past few weeks because Vivian needed support. I almost laughed. Support. Paula turned back to me. Mrs. Hartwell, may I speak with you privately? Of course. I led her down the hallway to the small bedroom, my bedroom now. I'd prepared for this. The folder Harrison had given me was on the desk along with my laptop. Paula closed the door behind us and sat in the chair I offered her. Mrs. Hartwell, I need to review your living situation and assess whether the concerns raised in the complaint have merit. Can you walk me through what's been happening? I handed her the folder. Everything you need is in here. She opened it. The first document was Dr. Klein's letter printed on official letterhead dated this morning. Paula read it aloud quietly. Mrs. Vivian Hartwell was evaluated on May 20th, 2024. She scored 30 out of 30 on the mini mental state examination, demonstrating full cognitive capacity with no impairment. She is fully competent to manage her personal and financial affairs. She looked up at me. You had this evaluation done today, this morning. I knew this complaint was coming. She flipped to the next document, the trust. And this, a revocable living trust, also signed this morning. My attorney advised me to protect my assets legally. Paula studied the trust, then the bank statements underneath. These show you managing your accounts independently, no unusual transactions, no signs of financial exploitation. That's correct. She set down the folder and looked at me. Mrs. Hartwell, why do you think this complaint was filed? Because they want me to look incompetent, I said. Because if I look incompetent, no one will believe me when I say they're lying. About what? I told her. About Eugene and Lorraine arriving unannounced, about Lorraine's fake arthritis medication, about the fabricated life insurance story, about the smear campaign phone calls to my realtor, my church, my neighbors, all questioning my mental state. Paula listened, taking notes. When I finished, she said, "Do you have evidence of any of this?" I opened my laptop. Camera footage. I pulled up the video from the night Lorraine had walked down the stairs 2 steps at a time. No limp, no pain. Then the footage of the bear pawing at the back porch while Eugene and Lorraine screamed inside. Paula watched in silence. When the videos ended, she closed the laptop and looked at me. "Mrs. Hartwell, I need to speak with Mr. and Mrs. Caldwell separately. I'll be back in a few minutes." I waited in the small bedroom, listening to the muffled voices from the kitchen. First, Paula interviewed Eugene. I couldn't hear the words, but I could hear his tone calm, reasonable, concerned. Then Lorraine. Her voice was higher, more defensive. 15 minutes later, Paula came back. "Mrs. Hartwell, I've completed my assessment." I stood. "I'm closing this case as unfounded. You've provided ample evidence of your cognitive capacity, your financial management, and your ability to maintain your home. There is no basis for the concerns raised in the complaint." The relief was so sudden I had to sit down. "Thank you," I said quietly. Paula's expression softened slightly. "However, Mrs. Hartwell, I do want to give you some advice, off the record. Please. The individuals living in your home, Mr. and Mrs. Caldwell, gave contradictory answers during their interviews. When I asked how long they'd been here, he said 3 weeks. She said almost a month. When I asked why they were here, he said you invited them. She said their son arranged it because you couldn't manage on your own." I nodded. "They're lying. I can't make that determination officially, but I can tell you that in my 20 years doing this work, I know when something doesn't add up." She stood and handed me a business card. "If anything escalates, call me and document everything. I will." We walked back to the living room together. Eugene and Lorraine looked up expectant. Paula didn't sit. "I've completed my investigation. The case is closed. Mrs. Hartwell has demonstrated full competency and financial independence. There are no grounds for further action." Eugene's face went still. Lorraine blinked. "But if you have further concerns..." Paula said, her voice professional and final, "I recommend you speak with a private attorney. This agency has no further involvement." She walked to the front door. I followed her. On the porch, she turned and looked at me one more time. "Good luck, Mrs. Hartwell." "Thank you." She was halfway to her car when Eugene stepped outside. "Ms. Hendricks." Paula stopped but didn't turn around. Eugene's voice was cold. "You're making a mistake." Paula opened her car door. "Have a good day, Mr. Caldwell." He turned to me, and for a moment I saw the mask drop. No concern, no worry, just cold, calculated anger. "This isn't over, Vivian." His voice was low, deliberate. "We'll see what a real judge thinks when we file for conservatorship. You won't be so smug then." Paula's car was still in the driveway. She'd heard him. She rolled down her window and looked at me. Her voice was quiet, meant only for me. "Document everything and call your lawyer." Then she drove away. I stood on the porch watching the white sedan disappear down the road. Eugene smiled at me. "See you at dinner, Vivian." He went back inside. I stayed where I was, the afternoon sun warm on my face, my hands shaking. Round 1 was over, but the war had just begun. By mid-June, I'd fallen into a wary routine. Eugene and Lorraine were still in my house. They moved through the rooms like they belonged there. Lorraine in the master bedroom, Eugene on the couch, both of them acting as though the APS investigation had never happened. But I knew better. I saw the way Eugene watched me, the way Lorraine smiled when I passed her in the hallway. They were waiting for something. On Saturday morning, I drove to Asheville to buy groceries. Asheville was 30 minutes from Brevard, a bigger town with a Whole Foods and a farmer's market I liked. I parked near the grocery store and was walking toward the entrance when I saw her, Lorraine. She was half a block ahead of me, walking quickly, her purse slung over her shoulder. She wasn't heading toward the stores. She was heading toward a brick building with a small sign out front, Henderson and Associates, Real Estate and Tenant Law. I stopped. Lorraine pushed open the door and went inside. I stood there for a moment, groceries forgotten, my heart pounding. Then I walked back to my car, pulled out and parked across the street where I had a clear view of the building's entrance. And I waited. 45 minutes later, Lorraine came out. She was holding a folder, thick official looking, and she had her phone pressed to her ear. I rolled down my window just enough to hear. "He said we just need 60 more days," she was saying. Her voice was calm, satisfied. "Yes, after that she can't just kick us out. We'll have tenant rights. She'll have to go through the courts, and that takes months." I felt my stomach drop. She laughed. "No, she has no idea. She thinks we're just freeloading. She doesn't realize we're establishing residency." She got into her car, Eugene's car actually, and drove away. I sat there gripping the steering wheel, my hands shaking. Then I pulled out my phone and called Harrison. He answered on the second ring. "Vivian, everything okay?" "No." My voice was tight. I just saw Lorraine coming out of a real estate law office in Asheville. She was on the phone talking about 60 more days and tenant rights. "Harrison, what are they planning?" There was a pause. "Give me the name of the office." "Henderson and Associates. Real estate and tenant law." "Hold on." I heard typing. Then Harrison's voice came back quieter. "I'm looking them up. They specialize in landlord-tenant disputes, evictions, squatter protections." "Squatter protections. Vivian, I need to make a call. I'll get back to you in an hour." "Harrison, 1 hour, I promise." He hung up. I drove home in a daze. The groceries sat in the back seat forgotten. When I pulled into the driveway, Eugene was on the porch drinking coffee. He waved at me, smiling. I didn't wave back. Inside, I paced the small bedroom, checking my phone every few minutes. Finally, Harrison called. "Vivian, I spoke with a colleague who knows tenant law in North Carolina. Here's what you need to understand. They're trying to establish tenant status." "What does that mean?" "It means they want to claim they're not guests, they're tenants. If they can do that, you can't just ask them to leave. You'd have to go through a formal eviction process." "How long does that take?" "In North Carolina, 30 to 60 days minimum. You file a 10-day notice to vacate. If they don't leave you, file a complaint in court. Then there's a hearing, a writ of possession, and finally the sheriff comes to remove them. It's time-consuming, expensive, and stressful." I sat down on the bed. "But they're not tenants. They didn't sign a lease. They're not paying rent." "That's true. But North Carolina doesn't have a strict 60-day rule that automatically makes someone a tenant. However, after 60 days, it becomes much easier for them to claim they're tenants. They can argue they had a verbal agreement that you accepted them living there, that they've been contributing to household expenses, whatever. The longer they stay, the stronger their claim. So they're buying time." "Exactly. And Vivian, if they establish tenant status and then you try to evict them, they can drag it out. They can request continuances, claim they need more time to find housing, file counterclaims. It could take months." I closed my eyes. "Harrison, when did they arrive?" "You tell me." "April 25th. Silence. Then that's 51 days. My chest tightened. "When do they hit 60? "June 24th. His voice was grim. "Vivian, you have 9 days. That evening, I sat at the small desk in my bedroom and pulled out a calendar. I circled April 25th in red, the day they arrived. Then I counted forward, May, June. June 24th, 60 days. I looked at today's date, June 15th. 9 days. I stared at the calendar, my mind racing. If they hit 60 days, they'd claim tenant rights. I'd have to evict them formally. That would take weeks, maybe months. And during that time, Eugene could file for conservatorship. He could argue I was unstable, incapable of managing my affairs, that I needed a guardian. And if a judge believed him, I'd lose everything. The house, my independence, my life. I thought about Lorraine on the phone. She has no idea. But I did know, now. I looked at the calendar again. June 24th. 9 days. I needed a plan, and I needed it fast. The next morning, I called Harrison. "I need options," I said. "I'm working on it. Give me until Monday. We'll figure this out." "Harrison, I don't have time." "I know." His voice was steady, reassuring. "But Vivian, you've done everything right so far. You have the trust. You have the medical evaluation. You have documentation. We're going to stop them." "How?" "Let me think. I'll call you Monday morning." I hung up and stared out the window. Eugene was in the yard talking on his phone. He looked up and saw me watching. He smiled and gave me a little salute. I turned away. 9 days. The clock was ticking. That night I couldn't sleep. I lay in the narrow bed in the small room and stared at the ceiling, listening to the house settle around me. Eugene's snoring drifted from the living room. Lorraine's footsteps creaked overhead, pacing, then stopping, then the sound of a door closing. 9 days. The words played on a loop in my head. 9 days until they hit 60. 9 days until they could claim tenant rights. 9 days to stop them. At 11 o'clock, the house finally went quiet. I waited another 30 minutes to be sure. Then I got up, pulled on my robe, and opened the door. The hallway was dark. I moved slowly, carefully, my bare feet silent on the wood floor. At the top of the stairs, I paused and listened. Eugene's snoring, steady, rhythmic. From the master bedroom, nothing. I crept down the stairs. The living room was dimly lit by the glow of the streetlight outside. Eugene was sprawled on the couch, one arm flung over his face. His phone was charging on the side table. Next to it was Lorraine's purse, a large leather bag half open. I looked at Eugene, still snoring. I crossed the room and picked up the purse. Inside, I found her wallet, her keys, a pack of gum, a lipstick. Nothing unusual at first glance. And then tucked into a side pocket a business card. I pulled it out and held it up to the streetlight. Henderson and Associates, Real Estate and Tenant Law, Asheville, North Carolina. On the back, someone Lorraine probably had written in pencil 60-day rule. My heart pounded. This was proof. Proof they were planning this. Proof it wasn't just paranoia on my part. I took a photo with my phone, the camera shutter silent. Then I kept searching. At the bottom of the purse, folded inside a manila envelope, I found papers, medical documents. I pulled them out carefully and scanned the first page. Diagnosis: osteoarthritis, bilateral knees, and lumbar spine. Prescribing physician Dr. Robert Henderson, MD. Date: April 10th, 2024. I frowned. Dr. Robert Henderson. The same last name as the law firm. That seemed too convenient. I opened my phone and searched Dr. Robert Henderson, Orthopedic, North Carolina. Nothing. I tried Dr. Robert Henderson, Asheville. Still nothing. I tried the North Carolina Medical Board database, a site I'd used dozens of times in my paralegal work. I knew how to verify credentials. I knew how to check if a doctor was legitimate. No Dr. Robert Henderson licensed in North Carolina. The document was fake. Lorraine had forged medical records to justify taking my bedroom. She'd lied about arthritis, faked pain, manipulated Trevor into calling me on her behalf, all based on documents from a doctor who didn't exist. I took photos of every page, the fake diagnosis, the fake prescription recommendations, all of it. Then I found the letters, 3 of them stuffed into another envelope at the bottom of the purse, all addressed to Eugene Caldwell at my address, my cottage, my home. The first was from a bank account opening confirmation, Wells Fargo. Thank you for opening a checking account with us. Your routing number and account number are listed below. The second was from Chase. Welcome to your new Visa card. Your card will arrive within 7 to 10 business days. The third was from Duke Energy Service setup confirmation. Your electricity service has been established at 1247 Davidson River Road, Brevard, North Carolina. They were establishing residency, officially, with paper trails, bank accounts, credit cards, utility bills, all in Eugene's name, all at my address. This wasn't just squatting. This was identity theft. This was fraud. I took photos of all 3. Upstairs, I heard a door open. I froze. Footsteps, the bathroom, water running. I shoved the letters back into the purse, zipped it, and set it back on the side table exactly as I'd found it. Then I moved quickly, silently back across the living room and up the stairs. I was in my room with the door closed before the bathroom light went off. My hands were shaking. My heart was racing. But I had what I needed, evidence. It was 2 a.m. when I finally sat down at the small desk and opened my laptop. I uploaded the photos and wrote an email to Harrison. Subject: urgent. Evidence of mail fraud and fake documents. Harrison. Found these in Lorraine's purse tonight. Business card from the law office she visited. Fake medical documents, doctor doesn't exist. I checked the NC Medical Board. And 3 letters addressed to Eugene at my address bank account credit card utility setup. They're establishing residency. This is mail fraud. Federal crime. Call me as soon as you get this. Vivian. I hit send and closed the laptop. Then I lay down on the bed and stared at the ceiling again. I didn't sleep. I kept thinking about what I'd found. The business card, the fake doctor, the letters. It was all part of a plan. A deliberate, calculated plan to take my home. At 6 in the morning, I got up and walked outside to check the mailbox. The air was cool, the sky just starting to lighten. The gravel crunched under my shoes as I walked down the driveway to the road. I opened the mailbox. 2 more letters. Both addressed to Eugene Caldwell at my address. The first was from Duke Energy, probably a bill for the service he'd set up in my name. The second had an official seal in the corner, Georgia Department of Revenue. I stared at it. Then I walked back to the house, went into the kitchen, and closed the door. I turned the envelope over in my hands. It was addressed to Eugene, but it was at my house, my property. He'd given my address to the state of Georgia. I opened it. Inside was a single sheet of paper printed on official letterhead. Final notice, property tax delinquency. Property address, 428 Maple Street, Atlanta, Georgia. 30312. Owner of record, Eugene Caldwell. Amount owed $11,700. This is your final notice. Failure to remit payment within 30 days will result in a tax lien being placed on the property and initiation of foreclosure proceedings. I read it twice. Then I sat down at the kitchen table and stared at the letter. They hadn't lost their house. They'd abandoned it. They'd stopped paying property taxes, stopped paying bills, and they'd left Georgia owing $11,700. They'd walked away from their home and come here to mine to escape their debts. They weren't victims. They were running from debt, and they'd come here to my house, my cottage, my home to hide, to establish residency so I couldn't kick them out, to buy time while they figured out their next move. For what? Conservatorship? More fraud. Another scheme. I didn't know. But I knew one thing: this was bigger than I'd thought. This wasn't just about taking advantage of my hospitality. This wasn't even just about squatting. This was organized fraud, multiple crimes, federal offenses. My phone rang. I picked it up. Harrison Stone. Vivian. His voice was tight. I got your email. I've been up since 5 going through those photos. And this changes everything. The fake medical documents, the mail fraud, these are federal crimes, Vivian. And the property tax letter, that's proof they're fleeing debt. We can use this. How? We file for an emergency injunction. We go to court and argue that they're occupying your home fraudulently, that they're using your address to commit mail fraud, and that you need immediate relief. If we move fast, we can get them out before they hit 60 days. I looked at the calendar on the wall. June 16th. 8 days left. How fast can we move? I asked. I'll file the petition today. We can get a hearing by the end of the week, but Vivian, you need to be ready. This is going to get ugly. I thought about Eugene's smile, Lorraine's fake arthritis, the letters, the lies, the fake doctor, the abandoned house in Georgia, the debts they were running from. I'm ready, I said. Good. I'll call you this afternoon with an update. In the meantime, document everything. Don't let them know you found this. I won't. He hung up. I sat at the kitchen table, the Georgia Department of Revenue letter in front of me, and took a deep breath. 8 days. The clock was still ticking. But now I had ammunition, and I was going to use every bit of it. 3 days after I discovered they'd abandoned their home in Atlanta, I sat in Harrison's office with a new stack of evidence spread across his conference table. The morning sun slanted through the blinds, casting long shadows over the pages. Harrison stood beside me. His navy tie loosened his reading glasses perched on his nose. He'd spent the last 72 hours following the money, and what he'd found made my stomach turn. I hired a private investigator, Harrison said, tapping a thick folder. Someone who specializes in financial forensics. Here's what we know. He opened the first section. A printout from Harrah's Cherokee Casino dated over the past 18 months. Line after line of cash advances, credit card charges, ATM withdrawals. At the bottom, a handwritten note from the investigator Eugene Caldwell. Total gambling losses, $63,000. $63,000, Harrison said quietly. Eugene's been chasing losses at Cherokee for nearly 2 years. He started small, couple hundred here and there. Then it escalated. Credit cards, cash advances, payday loans. He's maxed out everything. I stared at the numbers. Harrah's Cherokee was only an hour from Brevard. Eugene had been gambling practically in my backyard, losing money hand over fist, while pretending his family had fallen on hard times through no fault of their own. Harrison flipped to the next section. Trevor Brennan. Last year, he took out a home equity line of credit against Claire's house, $52,000. He told Claire it was for a kitchen remodel, but the money never touched the house. Where did it go? I asked, though I already knew. To Eugene. Trevor wired $30,000 to his father in 3 separate payments trying to cover the gambling debts. The rest went to pay down Lorraine's credit cards and their own bills. When the HELOC came due, Trevor couldn't make the payments, so he stopped paying the mortgage. He slid another document toward me, Claire's mortgage statement. Original loan, $180,000. Current balance, $168,300. And in red stamped across the top, delinquent, $11,700. 90 days past due. 3 months, Harrison said. The bank sent a final notice 2 weeks ago. If they miss one more payment, foreclosure proceedings begin. My hands were shaking. She didn't tell me. Trevor didn't give her a choice. He controls the finances. She probably doesn't even know how bad it is. Harrison's voice was grim. He's been intercepting the bank notices, opening the mail before she sees it. She thinks they're just having a rough patch. She has no idea the house is 90 days from foreclosure. The betrayal cut deeper than I'd expected. Not just what Trevor was doing to me, but what he was doing to my daughter, lying to her face, gambling away her security, using her home as collateral for his father's addiction. Harrison pulled out the last document, Lorraine's credit report. 5 maxed-out credit cards, $18,000 in debt, minimum payments and collections, total family debt. Harrison said is $324,700. I closed my eyes. The weight of it pressed down on me. This wasn't just desperation. This was a drowning family clawing for air, and they'd decided I was the only way out. My cottage was the lifeboat. My retirement savings were the rescue they'd been planning all along. There's something else, Harrison said. He sat down across from me, his expression grave. The bank holding Claire's mortgage, First National of Henderson, contacted me yesterday. They're preparing to sell the loan. I looked up. Sell it. When a mortgage goes into default, banks sometimes sell the note to investors at a discount. It's called a distressed mortgage sale. First National is offering Claire's loan for 65% of its value. That's $117,000. My pulse quickened. Who's buying it? No one yet. It's going to auction next week. But Vivian... He leaned forward. If you bought it, you'd become Claire's creditor. You'd own the debt. And that means you'd have leverage. I stared at him. Leverage? Right now, Trevor controls Claire through fear. If the bank forecloses, she loses her home. But if you own the mortgage, you can restructure it, forgive the arrears, lower the payments, or hold it over Trevor's head. Either way, you protect Claire. The idea settled over me slowly. I could save her house. I could take away Trevor's weapon. He wouldn't be able to threaten her with homelessness anymore. She'd be safe. But the cost. I sat back in my chair, my mind racing. How much do I have? Harrison pulled out a notepad. Your 401k has about $60,000. You told me you had savings from the sale of your Marietta house before you bought the cottage. How much is left? I thought back. Graham and I had sold our Marietta home 3 years ago after he died. The cottage cost $240,000. I'd used $150 from Graham's life insurance and $90 from savings. But we'd sold the Marietta house for $220. After paying off the old mortgage, we'd had about $90,000 left. I'd used $90 on the cottage. That left, I have about $60,000 in a checking account, I said slowly. Money I kept separate for emergencies. Harrison did the math. 60 from your 401k, 60 in cash. That's $120,000, enough to buy the mortgage and cover legal fees. But that's everything, I whispered. If I do this, I'll have nothing left. You'll have the cottage, Harrison said. You'll have the mortgage note, and you'll have Claire. I looked down at the documents spread across the table, the gambling debts, the maxed-out credit cards, the foreclosure notice, my entire retirement reduced to a number on a page. Everything Graham and I had worked for. Everything we'd saved penny by penny over 4 decades of marriage. Gone. But if I didn't act, Eugene and Lorraine would take the cottage anyway. They'd establish residency claim tenant rights, drag me through court for months, maybe years. And during that time, Trevor would let the foreclosure happen. Claire would lose her home. She'd have nowhere to go. No safety net. Unless I became that net, do it, I said. Harrison nodded. He opened his briefcase and pulled out a sheaf of papers. I had these drafted yesterday just in case. We'll set up an LLC Mountain Holdings, LLC. You'll be the sole member. The LLC will purchase the mortgage so your name stays off the public record. Trevor won't know you're the buyer until it's too late. I took the pen he offered. My hand was steady. I signed the LLC documents, the purchase agreement, the wire transfer authorization. $117,000. Everything I had left. When I finished, Harrison gathered the papers and locked them in his safe. He turned back to me, but his expression had changed. There was something else, something he was holding back. "What is it?" I asked. He hesitated. "Vivian, while the investigator was digging into Trevor's finances, he found something else. Something about Trevor's background." My chest tightened. "What kind of something?" Harrison sat down again. He folded his hands on the table. "Trevor worked as a paralegal in Atlanta 15 years ago. Same firm, same time period as Graham." The room went, "What are you saying?" I whispered. "I'm saying Trevor knew your husband, and I think that's how this all started." The words hung in the air between us. Trevor had known Graham, had worked beside him, had learned about his life insurance, his retirement plans, his dream of a mountain cottage, had maybe even heard Graham talk about his daughter Claire, and then targeted her, married her, not out of love, out of calculation. "He's been planning this for years," I said quietly. Harrison nodded. "I think so. I think he—" My hands were shaking again. "Does Claire?" "Not yet. I wanted to tell you first." I stood up and walked to the window. The mountains rose in the distance, green and endless. This was supposed to be my sanctuary, my reward for a lifetime of hard work and sacrifice. Graham's dream lived out in his memory. Instead, it had become "we stop him," I said, turning back to Harrison. "We take everything he thinks he's owed and we burn it to the ground." Harrison smiled. It wasn't a pleasant smile. "That's exactly." Before I reveal what Claire discovered in that laptop, the detailed plan, phase by phase, dollar by dollar, comment exposed below, to let me know you're still here. I need to know if you're ready for this truth. Fair warning, what comes next includes some fictionalized details added for storytelling and educational purposes. If that's not for you, you can stop right here. But if you stay, you'll see the whole picture. It was the 10th time I'd called Claire that week. The first 9 had gone straight to voicemail. But on Friday night at 8 o'clock, she finally answered. "Mom." Her voice was a whisper, tight and fast. "I can't talk long. Trevor's in the shower, but I need to tell you something." I closed the door to my small office and sat down, my heart already racing. Through the wall, I could hear the muted sound of the television in the living room. Eugene and Lorraine were watching the news. I kept my voice low. "What is it, sweetheart? 2 months ago." Claire began her words tumbling over each other. I started noticing Trevor was working late. Really late. One night I walked past his laptop and saw an email open. The subject line was Asset Management Solutions. I didn't think much of it at first, but something felt wrong. I gripped the phone tighter. "Go on." In early June, Trevor went to Atlanta for a work trip. 3 days. I did something I'm not proud of. I installed an app on our laptop. It's called Family Tracker Pro. It's supposed to be for parents monitoring kids, but it works on any device. It records keystrokes, passwords, emails, everything. My pulse quickened. "You put a keylogger on his computer." "Yes." Her voice cracked. "I know it's terrible, but Mom, I had to know. And what I found—" She paused. I heard water running in the background. Trevor's shower was still going. "Claire, what did you find?" "I'm going to send you the login for the app right now. You need to see this yourself." My phone buzzed. A text from Claire, a website link, a username, a password. I opened my laptop, typed in the URL, and logged in. the screen filled with data screenshots, keystroke logs, file access history, and there in the center, a live view of Trevor's desktop. "Do you see the folder?" Claire whispered. "On his desktop, Asset Management." I clicked it. Inside were 3 files, an Excel spreadsheet, a PDF of legal notes, and an email thread. I opened the spreadsheet first. Property Timeline.xlsx. The title alone made my stomach drop. I scrolled down. Phase 1. Move parents into Vivian's cottage. April 2024, complete. Phase 2. Establish residency. 60 days target. June 24th, 2024. In progress. Phase 3. Claim tenant rights/adverse possession. July 2024. Phase 4. Force Vivian to leave or declare her incompetent August to September 2024. Phase 5. Sell cottage estimated $420,000 plus sell. Claire's house estimated $385,000 equals total $805,000. Phase 6. Divorce Claire. Split assets 50-50, net profit $402,000. I stared at the screen. The numbers blurred. Phase 6. Divorce Claire. This wasn't just about stealing my cottage. Trevor had been planning to destroy my daughter's life from the very beginning. "Mom," Claire's voice pulled me back. "Are you still there?" I'm here," I whispered. But my hands were shaking so hard I could barely hold the phone. I scrolled down further. Below the timeline was a financial breakdown. Current debts, $324,700. Eugene gambling. Trevor, HELOC. Claire mortgage arrears. Lorraine credit cards. Cottage sale, $420,000. Claire's house sale, $385,000. Total assets, $805. 000. Debt payoff, $324,700, remaining $480,300, 50-50 split after divorce, $240,150 each. Trevor's additional profit after keeping his half of Claire's house equity, $402,000, he'd done the math. Down to the dollar, my daughter wasn't his wife. She was a line item in a spreadsheet. "Open the email thread," Claire said quietly. I clicked the second file. It was a series of emails between Trevor and Eugene, sent in May. From Trevor Brennan to Eugene Caldwell. Date May 8th, 2024. Subject progress update. "Dad, we're on schedule. You and Mom have been in the house for 2 weeks, but you need to be more aggressive. Make her life hell. She's tougher than we thought." From Eugene Caldwell to Trevor Brennan. Date May 10th, 2024. Subject RE progress update. "We tried the bear thing. Didn't work. Lorraine's pushing the medical angle, but Vivian's not buying it." From Trevor Brennan to Eugene Caldwell. Date May 12th, 2024. Subject RE progress update. "Bear tactic was stupid. Try the APS contact. Get someone official involved. Make her look unstable. I'll send you the script." I felt sick. Trevor had told Eugene to call Adult Protective Services. He'd orchestrated every single move. "There's more," Claire said. "Open the PDF." I clicked the third file. It was a scanned document, handwritten notes on legal letterhead. Henderson and Associates, Estate Planning. Dated March 15th, 2024, a month before Eugene and Lorraine moved in. The notes were bullet points written in Trevor's handwriting. Elder conservatorship process, 6 to 12 months. Requires proof of incapacity equals need 2 doctors. Adverse possession, North Carolina, 20 years continuous occupancy. Not viable tenant rights. 60-plus days residency equals legal eviction required 3 to 6 months. Best strategy combined tenant claim plus conservatorship petition. Backup plan if Vivian resists leverage. Claire's mortgage. My vision tunneled. March 15th. Trevor had consulted a lawyer about taking my home before he'd even moved his parents in. This wasn't a desperate plan born out of debt. This was calculated, premeditated. "Mom," Claire whispered, and her voice was breaking now. "He planned this before we even got married. I think he knew about you." about the cottage, about Dad. I closed my eyes. The pieces were clicking into place. Trevor had worked at the same law firm as Graham 15 years ago. He would have known Graham had life insurance. He would have known I'd inherit money when Graham died. And somehow he'd found Claire, targeted her, married her. He used you, I said quietly. He used you to get to me. I know. She was crying now. I'm so sorry, Mom. I didn't see it. I should have. Claire, stop. This isn't your fault. But it is. I brought him into your life. I let him. Sweetheart, listen to me. We have everything we need now. This spreadsheet, these emails, the legal notes, this is evidence. Harrison can use this. The FBI can use this. Trevor just handed us the case. She was quiet for a moment, then, there's one more thing. I waited. Mom, I'm pregnant. The room tilted. 14 weeks. Claire continued, her voice barely audible. I found out a month ago, and Trevor, he doesn't know yet. Why haven't you told him? Because I'm terrified. Her voice broke. If he finds out, he'll use the baby to control me. He'll say I can't leave him, that I need him for the baby. Or worse, he'll use it as leverage in the divorce. Mom, what do I do? I stared at the laptop screen at Trevor's cold clinical plan. Phase 6, divorce Claire. He'd been willing to throw her away like garbage. But a baby changed everything. Trevor would never let Claire go if he knew she was carrying his child, not because he loved her, but because a child was another asset, another piece to control. Don't tell him, I said. Not yet, not until we're ready. Ready for what? To make sure you and the baby are safe. To make sure Trevor can't touch either of you. Through the phone, I heard a door open. Trevor's voice, distant. Claire, who are you talking to? I have to go, she whispered. Claire. I'll call you tomorrow. I love you. The line went dead. I sat in the dark office staring at the glowing screen. Trevor's spreadsheet was still open. Phase 6, $402,000, divorce Claire. Not if I could stop him. Sunday morning arrived with a soft knock on my door. It was 9 o'clock and I was still in my robe pouring my second cup of coffee when I heard it 3 quick taps, barely loud enough to wake a mouse. I opened the door to find Claire standing on the porch, her eyes red and swollen, her hands clutching her purse like a lifeline. Mom, she whispered, can I come in? I pulled her inside without a word. Through the hallway, I could hear the low murmur of the television in the living room. Eugene and Lorraine were awake watching the Sunday morning news. I led Claire quickly into the kitchen and shut the door behind us. She sat down at the small table and the tears came immediately. Silent, steady, soaking into the collar of her pale blue blouse. I poured her a cup of coffee and set it in front of her, then took her hands in mine. They were ice cold. Tell me everything, I said. She took a shaky breath. Trevor thinks I'm at church. First Baptist. The service doesn't end until 10:45. I have maybe an hour. I nodded. Then we don't waste time. Talk to me. I'm 14 weeks pregnant, she said, her voice breaking on the last word. I found out 3 weeks ago. I took the test in the Walgreens bathroom because I was too scared to do it at home. It was positive, and I haven't told Trevor. My chest tightened. Why not? She looked down at her hands. Because this isn't the first time. I waited. 11 months ago. Claire said quietly, I was pregnant. We'd been trying for almost a year. I was so happy, Mom. I thought maybe a baby would fix things between us. Make Trevor softer. Make him care. Her voice cracked. I made it to 11 weeks, and then I lost the baby. I squeezed her hands, but I didn't speak. I let her continue. Trevor was in Atlanta on a work trip when it happened. I called him. I was bleeding terrified, and I called him and told him I needed him to come home. He said he couldn't. He said the meetings were too important. He told me to call my friend Sarah and go to the hospital with her. A tear slid down her cheek. I lost the baby alone, Mom, in a hospital room with a nurse I'd never met. And when Trevor came home 2 days later, he didn't hug me. He didn't cry. He looked at me and said, You were too stressed. You couldn't handle it. Maybe this is for the best. My throat burned. I wanted to speak, but the words wouldn't come. After that, Claire continued, he started saying it all the time. Whenever I was upset, whenever I disagreed with him, he'd say, You're too emotional. You can't handle pressure. That's why you lost the baby." And I started to believe him. "Claire, I thought it was my fault," she whispered. "I thought I failed. My doctor cleared me to try again after 6 months, but I waited longer. And when I found out I was pregnant again 9 months after the miscarriage, I didn't tell him because I was terrified I'd lose this one too. I didn't want him to know until I was sure, until I made it past 11 weeks. I stood up, walked around the table, and pulled her into my arms. She collapsed against me, sobbing into my shoulder. "Listen to me," I said, my voice low and fierce. "You did not fail. You did not cause that miscarriage, and Trevor is a monster for making you think you did." She pulled back, wiping her eyes. "I know that now. I didn't see it before, but I see it now." "What changed?" I asked. 2 weeks ago." She said, "I was looking through the keylogger data and I found the spreadsheet. Phase 6, Divorce Claire. When I read that, I realized he was never going to stay. He was using me. The baby, the house, everything, it was all part of the plan. And if I told him I was pregnant, he'd use that too. He'd twist it. He'd say I got pregnant on purpose to trap him, or he'd fight for custody just to control me." I sat back down, my mind racing. "So you decided to help me?" "I decided to fight back," she said. "For the first time in my life, I'm fighting back." I reached across the table and squeezed her hand. "You're not alone anymore. I'll protect you, and I'll protect this baby." She nodded, and for the first time since she'd arrived, I saw something other than fear in her eyes. I saw determination. Claire reached into her purse and pulled out a small USB drive. She set it on the table between us. "Everything is on here," she said. "The emails, the spreadsheets, the screenshots from the keylogger. I made a backup copy in case Trevor finds the app on the laptop and deletes everything. This way, we still have proof." I picked up the flash drive and closed my fist around it. It felt like holding a weapon. "There's something else," Claire said. "Trevor has a meeting on Thursday, June 27th. He told me it's with a financial advisor. He said it's about finalizing the property strategy. Mom, I think he's moving to phase 3. I think he's going to file the tenant rights claim." I pulled out my phone and typed a note, Trevor. Financial advisor, June 27th. I'd call Harrison the moment Claire left. "We're running out of time," I said. "I know." She glanced at the clock on the wall. It was 10:20. "I have to go. If I'm not back before the service ends, Trevor will get suspicious." She stood and I walked her to the door. But before she opened it, she turned back to me, her eyes full of a question she was afraid to ask. "Mom," she said softly, "if I divorce him, will I lose everything? The house, the baby, everything." I took her face in my hands. "Not if I have anything to say about it." "What do you mean?" I smiled, just a small, quiet smile. "Trust me, sweetheart, you're going to be okay." She searched my face, trying to understand, but I didn't explain. Not yet. There would be time for that later. "Go," I said, "before he notices." She hugged me one more time, then slipped out the door. I watched through the window as she climbed into her car and drove away, disappearing down the winding mountain road. I stood there for a long time, holding the USB drive, feeling its weight in my palm. Trevor thought he had all the cards. He thought he was 10 steps ahead, but he had no idea what was coming. By 8 o'clock that night, Eugene and Lorraine had gone to bed. I heard their bedroom door close the springs of the old guest bed creaking as they settled in. I waited 15 minutes listening to the silence, and then I closed the kitchen door, locked it, and spread everything across the dining table. 59 days. Tomorrow would be the 60th day. Tomorrow, Trevor would claim his parents had tenant rights. Tomorrow, the real fight would begin. But tonight, I had something Trevor didn't know. I had a fortress of evidence. I started with the inheritance lie. The email from Prudential dated May 3rd confirming that Graham had only ever held one life insurance policy, a $150,000 term life policy paid out in full in September 2021. No $750,000. No brother. No windfall. Just a lie Trevor had fed to Claire to manipulate her into compliance. Next, the medical con. I laid out the photograph of Lorraine's pill bottle, the one I'd taken back in late April. The label read, multivitamin, joint support, not prescription arthritis medication. Beside it, I placed a printed screenshot from my security camera, Lorraine, descending the back porch steps on May 2nd, moving smoothly, no limp, no pain. She'd faked the entire thing to take my bedroom. Then came the squatter scheme. The business card from Henderson and Associates, the real estate law firm Lorraine had visited in Asheville on June 15th. On the back in her handwriting, 60-day rule, tenant rights. She'd been researching how to claim legal residency in my home so I couldn't remove them without a court eviction, a process that could take 6 months or more. The mail fraud was next. 5 letters, all addressed to Eugene Caldwell at my cottage address. 2 from banks Wells Fargo and Chase confirming new account openings. 1 from Duke Energy setting up a utility account. 2 from the Georgia Department of Revenue, a final notice for $11,700 in delinquent property taxes on a house at 428 Maple Street, Atlanta. The house they'd abandoned, not lost. Under federal law, using someone else's address to establish false residency was mail fraud, a felony, punishable by up to 20 years in prison. I moved to the financial web. The private investigator's report Harrison had commissioned, dated June 18th. Eugene Caldwell's $63,000 in gambling debts accumulated over 18 months at Harrah's Cherokee Casino. Trevor Brennan, $52,000 home equity line of credit, taken out secretly against Claire's house. Claire Brennan, $180,000 mortgage, $11,700 in arrears 3 months past due. Lorraine Caldwell, $18,000 in maxed-out credit cards. Total family debt, $324,700. And at the bottom of the page, the investigators note, motive, financial desperation. Then came Trevor's master plan. I pulled the USB drive Claire had given me that morning and opened the files on my laptop. The spreadsheet property timeline.xlsx was there in full color. Phase 1. Move parents into cottage. Phase 2. Establish residency. Phase 3. Claim tenant rights. Phase 4. Force Vivian out or declare her incompetent. Phase 5. Sell cottage, $420,000 plus. Sell Claire's house, $385,000 equals $805,000 total. Phase 6. Divorce. Claire split assets, 50-50. Net profit, $402,000. I printed it out and laid it on the table. Beside it, I placed the email thread between Trevor and Eugene dated May 8th through May 12th. Trevor's words were cold and clear. You need to be more aggressive. Make her life hell. Bear tactic didn't work. Try the APS contact. Finally, I pulled out the paperwork from Mountain Holdings, LLC, the limited liability company I'd formed on June 19th. The purchase agreement for Claire's mortgage note, bought from First National of Henderson for $117,000, 65% of its face value. I was now Claire's creditor. I owned her house, and that meant Trevor couldn't take it from her. I sat back and looked at the table. 7 categories of evidence. Dates, amounts, names, screenshots, legal documents. It was all there. Everything we needed to destroy them. At 9 o'clock, I called Harrison. He answered on the second ring. Vivian, I've been waiting for your call. I have everything, I said. What's next? We file a federal complaint with the FBI, Harrison said without hesitation. Mail fraud is a felony under Title 18, Section 1341. The moment Eugene started receiving mail at your address with intent to defraud, he committed a federal crime. Combined with the financial exploitation angle targeting a 68-year-old widow, this becomes an elder abuse case. The FBI takes those very seriously. How fast can they move? I'll contact Special Agent Sarah Mitchell first thing tomorrow morning. She's with the Charlotte Field Office handles financial fraud and elder abuse in western North Carolina. If she agrees the evidence is strong, and Vivian it is, she can get a warrant within 48 hours. Arrest could happen as early as Wednesday morning. Wednesday, June 26th, 2 days from now. What about Claire? I asked. She needs to file for divorce immediately, Harrison said. If Trevor is arrested, he won't be able to contest. And since you own her mortgage, she won't lose the house. You can forgive the arrears, restructure the payments, whatever you want. She'll be protected. I closed my eyes. She's scared. I know, but she's also ready. I can feel it. I sent her an email tonight, I said. Told her she has 72 hours to decide. Good, Harrison said. That gives us time to move before Trevor does. His meeting with the financial advisor is Thursday, right? June 27th. He won't make it to that meeting, Harrison said quietly. By then, he'll be in custody. I let out a breath I didn't know I'd been holding. Thank you, Harrison. Don't thank me yet. We still have work to do. But Vivian, you've built an ironclad case. Trevor and his parents are finished. We hung up. I sat at the table for another hour, staring at the evidence, feeling the weight of what was about to happen. This wasn't just about protecting my cottage anymore. It was about protecting Claire and the baby she was carrying, and every other person Trevor and his parents might target if I let them walk away. At 10 o'clock, I opened my laptop and started typing. Sweetheart, I know this is the hardest decision of your life, but you need to know something. I own your mortgage now. The bank sold it to me 4 days ago. If you leave Trevor, you won't lose your house. I'll make sure of it. You have 72 hours before the FBI moves. After that, everything changes. Tell me you're ready, and I'll tell you what to do next. I love you, Mom. I read it 3 times. Then I hit send. The email disappeared into the void. I sat there staring at the screen, waiting for a reply that I knew wouldn't come until morning. At 11 o'clock, I turned off the lights and went to bed. But I didn't sleep. I lay in the dark, listening to the sound of the creek outside my window, thinking about tomorrow. The 60th day. The day Trevor thought he'd won. He had no idea. When I woke at 6 the next morning, the first thing I did was check my phone. There was a message from Claire sent at 5:30 a.m. I'm ready. Tell me what to do. I smiled. My hands were steady as I typed my reply. Meet me at Harrison's office, 9 a.m. We're filing today. I set the phone down and stood at the window watching the sun rise over the mountains. By tonight, Trevor would know. By tomorrow, the FBI would move. And by the end of the week, this would all be over. 72 hours after I sent the email, I was sitting in my car outside Claire's house in Hendersonville, watching the sun climb over the ridge. It was Wednesday morning, June 26th, the 60th day. This was the day. At exactly 9 o'clock, 2 black FBI sedans pulled up to the curb. I stepped out of my car and met them on the sidewalk. A woman in her 40s, gray suit, FBI badge clipped to her belt, extended her hand. Mrs. Hartwell, I'm Special Agent Sarah Mitchell. This is Special Agent Daniel Cole. The man beside her, mid-30s dark suit, laptop bag slung over his shoulder, nodded. Ma'am, thank you for coming, I said quietly. Sarah's expression was calm, professional. We've reviewed the evidence your attorney submitted. It's compelling. Let's go talk to Mr. Brennan. We walked up the driveway together. Sarah knocked 3 sharp raps. A moment later, the door opened. Trevor stood there in gym shorts and a faded t-shirt, a coffee mug in his hand. His eyes went from Sarah to Daniel to me. His face went pale. Mr. Brennan, Sarah said, holding up her badge. I'm Special Agent Sarah Mitchell, FBI. This is Special Agent Cole. We have a warrant for the arrest of Eugene and Lorraine Caldwell on charges of federal mail fraud. Trevor blinked. What? They're not here. They're at Vivian's cottage in Brevard. We're aware, Sarah said calmly. A second team is executing the warrant there as we speak. But we need to ask you some questions. May we come in? Trevor hesitated, then stepped aside. We followed him into the living room. Claire was standing by the window, her arms crossed. When she saw me, her shoulders relaxed just a fraction. I walked over and stood beside her. Trevor turned to her, his voice sharp. Did you know about this? Claire didn't answer. She just looked at him, her face unreadable. Daniel set his laptop on the coffee table and opened it. A moment later, an email thread appeared on the screen, Trevor's email address at the top, Eugene's at the bottom. Dated May 8th through May 12th. Mr. Brennan. Daniel said, Did you instruct your parents to use Mrs. Hartwell's address without her permission? No, Trevor said quickly. I don't know what you're talking about. Sarah stepped forward. We have emails from your account directing your father to make her life hell and to try the APS contact. We also have a spreadsheet titled Property Timeline, detailing a 6-phase plan to defraud Mrs. Hartwell of her home and to divorce your wife for financial gain. Do you deny writing these documents? Trevor's jaw tightened. He looked at Claire. Where did you get those files? Claire took a step forward. Her voice was steady, steadier than I'd ever heard it. "From your laptop," she said. "The one you thought I'd never check." Trevor stared at her. For the first time, I saw fear flicker across his face. "You used me," Claire continued, her voice growing stronger. "You used my mother, and you put our child at risk." Trevor's expression shifted confusion, then calculation. "What child?" "I'm 14 weeks pregnant," Claire said, "and I'm filing for divorce today." The room went silent. Trevor's eyes narrowed. "You can't do that. You'll lose the house. You'll lose everything." Claire smiled, just a small, quiet smile. "No, I won't. My mother owns the mortgage now. She bought it from the bank a week ago. You have no leverage, Trevor. You never did." Trevor turned to me, his face twisting with anger. But Sarah cut him off. "Mr. Brennan, you're not under arrest, yet. But I strongly advise you to cooperate. If we find evidence that you participated in this conspiracy, you will be charged." "Do you understand?" Trevor said nothing. He just stood there, fists clenched, breathing hard. My phone buzzed in my pocket. I stepped into the hallway and answered. "Vivian." It was Frank Whitmore, my neighbor. "They just took Eugene and Lorraine. FBI showed up at your cottage at 6:30 this morning, put them both in handcuffs and loaded them into a van. Lorraine was screaming the whole way down the driveway." I closed my eyes and let out a breath I didn't know I'd been holding. "Thank you, Frank." When I walked back into the living room, Sarah was handing her business card to Claire. "We'll need formal statements from both of you," Sarah said. "And Mrs. Brennan, if you're filing for divorce, document everything. Financial records, emails, text messages. This case could take months to resolve, but with the evidence we have, convictions are very likely." Claire took the card, her hand trembling slightly. "Thank you." Sarah turned to me. "Mrs. Hartwell, you'll be hearing from us soon. We may need you to testify before a grand jury." "I'll be ready," I said. Sarah and Daniel left. The door closed behind them. The house was silent. Trevor stood in the middle of the living room staring at the floor. When he finally spoke, his voice was low and cold. "You think you've won, but you have no idea what you've done. My parents have connections, lawyers. This isn't over." I looked at him, this man who had lied to my daughter, who had planned to destroy both of us, and I felt nothing but pity. "No, Trevor," I said quietly. "It is over. The FBI has everything, the emails, the spreadsheet, the mail fraud. And when a judge sees what you plan to do to Claire and that baby, you'll be lucky if you're not in the cell next to your parents." Trevor opened his mouth, then closed it. He had nothing left to say. I turned to Claire. "Let's go." She picked up her purse and walked past Trevor without looking at him. We stepped outside into the bright June morning. The air smelled like pine and summer rain. In the car, Claire started to cry, not from sadness, but from relief. I reached over and took her hand. "You're free now," I said. She nodded, wiping her eyes. "I know. 200 miles away in a holding cell in the FBI field office in Charlotte, Eugene Caldwell sat on a metal bench beside his wife. Lorraine's mascara was smeared down her cheeks. Her hands were still cuffed. "We need a lawyer," Eugene muttered. "A good one." Lorraine looked at him, her voice hollow. "With what money?" Eugene didn't answer. Outside the cell, Special Agent Sarah Mitchell stood with a file folder in her hands reviewing the charges. Mail fraud, conspiracy to commit elder financial abuse, wire fraud. If convicted, Eugene and Lorraine were each looking at 10 to 20 years in federal prison. She closed the folder and walked away. 3 months had passed since the arrests. On a Thursday morning in late September, I sat beside Claire in the gallery of the federal courthouse in Asheville. The room was all wood and stone-high ceilings and American flags, the kind of place that made you feel the weight of justice. Claire's hand rested on her belly, 27 weeks now, visibly pregnant, the baby moving beneath her palm. She wore a simple blue dress, her hair pulled back, her face calm. We'd been waiting for this day. At 10 o'clock, the bailiff called the courtroom to order. "All rise. The Honorable Judge Michael Hargrove presiding." The judge entered, a man in his early 60s. Gray hair, black robes, his expression unreadable. He took his seat behind the bench and nodded to the prosecutor. 2 deputies led Eugene and Lorraine Caldwell into the courtroom. They wore orange jumpsuits, their hands cuffed in front of them. Lorraine's hair was thinner than I remembered, streaked with gray she'd always dyed away. Eugene walked slowly, his shoulders hunched. They didn't look at us. The prosecutor stood. Your Honor, the United States versus Eugene Caldwell and Lorraine Caldwell. The defendants have entered guilty pleas to one count of mail fraud under Title 18 United States Code, Section 1341, and one count of conspiracy to commit financial exploitation of a vulnerable adult. The judge glanced at a file in front of him. Mr. and Mrs. Caldwell, you used the address of Mrs. Vivian Hartwell, a 68-year-old widow, to establish false residency with the intent to fraudulently claim her property. You orchestrated a campaign of harassment, including filing a false report with Adult Protective Services. You targeted a vulnerable elder and manipulated your own daughter-in-law in the process. He paused. The courtroom was silent. Do you have anything to say before sentencing? Eugene's attorney, a tired-looking public defender in a wrinkled suit, stood. Your Honor, my clients deeply regret their actions. They were under significant financial pressure. Mr. Caldwell has a gambling addiction which he is seeking treatment for. They ask for leniency. The judge looked at Eugene and Lorraine for a long moment. Then he spoke. Mr. Eugene Caldwell, you are hereby sentenced to 18 months in federal prison, followed by 3 years of supervised release. You are ordered to pay restitution to Mrs. Hartwell in the amount of $32,000. You are prohibited from contacting Mrs. Hartwell or Claire Brennan for the remainder of your life. Eugene's face didn't change. He just stared at the floor. Mrs. Lorraine Caldwell, you are sentenced to 12 months in federal prison, followed by 3 years of supervised release. You are ordered to pay restitution in the amount of $26,000. The same no-contact order applies. Lorraine's shoulders shook. I thought she might be crying, but she didn't make a sound. The judge's gavel struck once. This court is adjourned. The deputies led Eugene and Lorraine away. As they passed our row, Eugene turned his head slightly, just enough that I could see his eyes. There was no anger there, no defiance, just exhaustion, and then they were gone. Claire and I sat in the courthouse cafeteria afterward drinking bad coffee. She stared out the window at the mountains in the distance, her hand still resting on her belly. 18 months, she said quietly. It doesn't feel like enough. It's not, I said, but it's over. She nodded. I keep thinking about how close they came. If you hadn't installed those cameras, if I hadn't checked Trevor's laptop, but you did, I said, you were brave. She looked at me, her eyes red. I didn't feel brave. You were, I said again. You stood up to him. You saved yourself, and you saved that baby. Claire's hand moved in slow circles over her belly. The divorce was finalized 2 weeks ago, September 9th, 2024. I actually filed for legal separation back on May 15th, right after I found the keylogger data and realized what Trevor was planning. I didn't tell him I'd filed. I just let the paperwork sit with the clerk's office. North Carolina requires a full year of separation before you can get a divorce decree, but because I filed in May, by the time the FBI arrested his parents in June and the criminal case wrapped up in September, we'd already satisfied the 1-year waiting period. She paused, looking out at the mountains. The judge moved the final hearing up once he saw the evidence, the fraud, the pregnancy, the fact that Trevor had financially exploited both of us. Harrison said having a documented pattern of financial abuse and a vulnerable pregnant victim made the court prioritize my case. So instead of waiting until May 2025, the decree came through this month, free and clear. I already knew she'd called me the day the papers came through, but I let her talk. I kept the house, she said. You forgave the mortgage arrears, and you transferred the deed to me, free and clear. I don't even know how to thank you for that, Mom. You don't have to thank me, I said. It was always going to be yours. Trevor lost everything, Claire continued. The HELOC debt is his responsibility. He has no claim to the house, no custody rights to the baby. The FBI decided not to charge him. Harrison said they couldn't prove Trevor knew his parents were using your address for the mail fraud. His emails told them to make your life hell, but they didn't explicitly mention falsifying residency or opening fraudulent accounts. Without direct knowledge of the federal crime, they couldn't charge him as a co-conspirator. But it doesn't matter, he's gone. He lost his job. No one will hire him after this. He walked away with nothing. I nodded. It wasn't perfect justice. Trevor should have been in that courtroom beside his parents. But sometimes justice isn't about what people deserve. It's about what you can prove. He's gone, Claire said again, as if she needed to hear it. That's all that matters. Later that afternoon, we drove back toward Brevard. The leaves were starting to turn golds and reds, bleeding across the ridgeline. Claire was quiet for a long time, staring out the window. Mom, she said finally, I need to ask you something. What is it? Where am I going to raise this baby? Her voice was soft, uncertain. The house in Hendersonville is so big, and every room reminds me of Trevor. I don't know if I can stay there. I glanced at her. What if you didn't have to? She frowned. What do you mean? I smiled. I have an idea, but you have to trust me. Mom, just trust me. She looked at me for a long moment, then nodded. Okay. I turned off the main highway onto a narrow 2-lane road. The pavement gave way to gravel, winding through thick pines and oaks. Claire sat up straighter, confused. Where are we going? You'll see. 20 minutes later, I slowed the car and turned onto a private driveway. The gravel crunched beneath the tires. Claire leaned forward, peering through the windshield. Mom, she said slowly, what is this? I didn't answer. I just kept driving. The gravel driveway curved through a stand of oaks, and then the house appeared. It wasn't a house exactly, it was a barn, or it had been. Now it was something else entirely. Stone foundation, white painted wood, siding a pitched metal roof that gleamed in the late afternoon sun. Wide windows, a covered porch, a garden plot waiting for spring. It sat on a gentle slope surrounded by trees, quiet and perfect. Claire stared through the windshield. Mom, what is this? I turned off the engine. Come on, I'll show you. We walked up the stone path to the front door. I pulled a key from my pocket, new, shiny, never used, and unlocked it. The door swung open. Inside, the air smelled like fresh paint and sawdust. The main room was open and bright hardwood floors, a stone fireplace in the corner, a small kitchen with white cabinets and butcher block counters. Sunlight poured through the windows, casting warm squares across the floor. Claire walked slowly through the space, her hand trailing along the wall. Mom, I don't understand. This way, I said. I led her down a short hallway. The first door opened into a bedroom, simple clean, with a window overlooking the trees. The second door opened into a smaller room, painted a soft, buttery yellow. A wooden crib sat against one wall, still wrapped in plastic. A rocking chair by the window. A changing table with drawers waiting to be filled. A nursery. Claire stopped in the doorway. Her hand moved to her belly, 27 weeks now, the baby pressing against her ribs. She looked at me, her eyes wide. I bought this place in March, I said quietly. Before I found the cottage in Brevard. Before any of this started. You bought this? I nodded. After I sold the Marietta house, I had money left over. Not a lot, but enough. I found this barn. It was falling apart, 60 years old, the roof half caved in. The owner wanted $85,000. I offered $80,000 and he took it. Claire shook her head slowly as if trying to piece it together. I hired a contractor in April, I continued. A good one, local, someone Frank Whitmore recommended. It took 6 months. New foundation, new roof, all new wiring and plumbing. I came here every few weeks to check on the progress. Even while everything was happening with Eugene and Lorraine, the barn was being built. But why? Claire whispered. Why didn't you tell me? I looked at her. Because I knew you weren't happy with Trevor. I saw the signs, Claire. How he controlled the money, how you stopped calling me as much, how you flinched when you talked about him. I didn't know it would get as bad as it did. I didn't know about the plan, the fraud, the lies, but I knew you might need a way out someday. And I wanted you to have a place to go. Somewhere safe. Somewhere that was yours. Her face crumpled. She covered her mouth with her hand, tears streaming down her cheeks. I stepped forward and wrapped my arms around her. She sobbed into my shoulder, her whole body shaking. You did this for me, she said, her voice muffled. 6 months ago, before everything. I did it because you're my daughter, I said, and I will always protect you. We stood there for a long time, holding each other in the yellow nursery, the late September light slanting through the window. Finally, Claire pulled back and wiped her eyes. I don't know what to say. I reached into my pocket and pulled out the key. I pressed it into her palm and closed her fingers around it. "This is yours," I said. "No mortgage, no rent, no strings. You and the baby deserve a fresh start, and this is it." She looked down at the key, then back at me. "Mom, You don't have to say anything," I said. "Just say you'll use it." She smiled through her tears. "I will, I promise." 2 months later, on a cold January morning, Claire gave birth to a baby girl. I was there in the delivery room holding her hand, watching her breathe through the pain. And when the doctor placed that tiny, red-faced, wailing baby on Claire's chest, I felt something inside me shift. Not sadness, not fear, just hope. Pure, unguarded hope. Claire looked up at me, exhausted and radiant. "Her name is Grace." I blinked, surprised. "Grace, your middle name," Claire said softly. "The one Graham loved. I want her to carry it." I reached out and touched the baby's head, so small, so warm, a cap of dark hair plastered to her scalp. "Hello, Grace," I whispered. Claire moved into the barn in Hendersonville the week she brought Grace home from the hospital. I helped her unpack, set up the crib stock, the kitchen. And every morning after that, I walked the forest trail between our two homes. It was 1.5 miles through the pines and oaks, a narrow dirt path that wound along the ridge. The trail emerged in Claire's backyard just past the garden plot. Some mornings I brought coffee. Some mornings I brought groceries. Most mornings I just brought myself. I helped with feedings, diaper changes, the 1,000 small, exhausting tasks of early motherhood. Claire and I took turns rocking Grace to sleep, singing the same lullabies I'd once sung to her. We were a family again, not broken, not scattered, whole. Eugene and Lorraine were released from federal prison in early 2026. Eugene in March, Lorraine in February. We heard they'd moved to Florida, somewhere near Tampa, living with Lorraine's sister in a mobile home park. Someone told me Eugene was working at a convenience store. Someone else said Lorraine was still bitter, still blaming us for everything. I didn't care. They were gone from our lives. That was all that mattered. Trevor tried to contact Claire once in March 2025. A phone call first, which she didn't answer. Then an email, which she deleted. Then one afternoon, he showed up at the barn. Claire saw him through the window, standing in the driveway, hands in his pockets, looking up at the house. She called the sheriff. By the time the deputy arrived, Trevor was gone. He never came back. One evening in late spring, I sat on the porch of my cottage in Brevard, watching the sun sink behind the ridge. The mountains were green and full, the air warm and soft. Through the trees, I could just make out the roof of Claire's barn a 1/4 mile away across the forest. I imagined her inside rocking Grace to sleep, humming softly. I imagined the nursery glowing with lamplight, the crib casting shadows on the yellow walls. For the first time in 40 years, since the day Graham and I first talked about a house in the mountains, I felt his presence. Not in grief, not in longing, but in peace. Our dream had become 2 dreams, 2 cottages, 2 safe places, and both had come true. I whispered into the warm evening air, "We did it, sweetheart. We kept our family safe." The stars began to appear one by one. I sat there until the sky was full of light, and the night was gentle, and I was home. Looking back on everything that happened, I realized God protected us in ways I couldn't see at the time. When I felt most alone standing in that cottage watching strangers take over my home, He was already making a way. When Claire called me that first night, scared and trapped, I believe God gave me the courage to fight. And when we finally held baby Grace in our arms, safe and free, I knew God had carried us through the storm. If there's one lesson I want to share, it's this. Don't do what I did. Don't wait. Don't let fear or politeness keep you silent when someone crosses your boundaries. I let Eugene and Lorraine into my home because I didn't want to seem unkind. That hesitation nearly cost me everything. Trust your instincts. Protect what's yours. And never be afraid to ask for help, whether from a lawyer, a neighbor, or God Himself. This family drama story taught me that silence is dangerous. I've heard so many family revenge stories from people who've been through similar situations. Parents manipulated by in-laws, children used as leverage homes, stolen through fraud. These family drama stories aren't just entertainment. They're warnings. And the truth is, family revenge stories like mine happen more than you think. The victims are often too ashamed to speak up. My advice: document everything. Build your legal fortress before you need it. And don't underestimate people who smile while they plot against you. Every family drama story I've heard since has one thing in common: the victim waited too long. In the end, Claire and Grace are safe. Eugene and Lorraine are gone. And I sit on my porch every evening watching the mountains turn gold, knowing we survived. If this resonated with you, please leave a comment below. Share your own family revenge stories, or just let me know you're listening. Subscribe to the channel if you want to hear more stories like mine. And thank you for staying until the end. A quick note. Some upcoming stories contain fictionalized elements created for educational purposes. If that's not for you, feel free to browse other content that better suits your preferences. God bless you all, stay safe, and protect your family.